Latitude is a leading provider of global residency and citizenship solutions with a portfolio of over 5,000 clients. They operate in 20 countries worldwide and secure second citizenships and residencies in desirable locations. Here with me today is Christopher Willis, the managing partner of Latitude. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ari. Great to be here.
So what exactly is Latitude?
So Latitude, we focus on two main areas, predominantly private client services to help people obtain a second residence or citizenship. The second angle we work on is with government advisory. So we actually work with governments and are trusted by governments to help them either refine their existing programs, or in some cases, we create them from scratch, as we've done recently in Anguilla, where we were mandated to set up 2 residency programs beginning to end, A to Z.
Why would somebody want a second citizenship?
Well, it's a great question because the world certainly has changed. And, 3 or 4 or 5 years ago in the United States, it wasn't really in the thought process for Americans, because you could get on a plane as an American, you never really thought about it. You were blessed to be born in a country where you had such freedoms. But then when the pandemic hit, suddenly, many of you will remember, there was a travel ban. So it didn't matter who you were. If you only had a US passport, you were not flying to Canada. You were not getting into the United Kingdom. You weren't getting to Europe. You weren't getting to Singapore or the UAE. So your wings were well and truly clipped. And Americans don't like to be told you can't do something. So what suddenly happened was they were saying, well, how do I better prepare for this? And this is where the necessity for a second residence or citizenship became much more in the mainstream for people looking at another option. As a matter of fact, many of the family offices we work with, they identified that we don't have this solution in place. So they're now adding this to their repertoire to ensure they have a more complete portfolio for the families they represent.
Interesting. And you mentioned, Christopher, that you work with government agencies. Mm-hmm. Which ones specifically, and what does that look like? Well,
we work actually with governments directly. So we continually advise. So, for example, there's been some recent changes in the Caribbean. St. Kitts and Nevis, for example, have just doubled their investment amount and added some other procedural elements, which makes the process a little bit more cumbersome. So, for example, in the past, you could have your citizenship and passport documents couriered to you. Now you must collect them either in person or at a designated consulate or embassy abroad. So they've made some changes. There's a perception that the Caribbean is a sunny place for shady people, right? Which isn't the case at all. When you actually dig deeper into this and you see the amount of due diligence that's done, it is very, very solid. And this is something that's continually evolving to ensure that the right people are qualifying for the right reasons.
You talked about, you touched upon bad actors in this space, and, mm-hmm. and I appreciate you bringing that up. What you guys are doing, it sounds like, is raising the bar and setting yourselves up as examples for mm-hmm. how the rest of the industry should look like. What does that look like in specific?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's critical, at this stage to make sure you do your initial onboarding verifications on your potential clients. So we don't actually onboard a client until they've completed our own internal processes, which includes providing copies of their passports, details of which bank the funds will be sent from, etc. So we can make sure they're not going to be criminal risk, a reputational risk, or have any issues with their source of wealth or source of funds that would make them inadmissible for one of these programs.
And talk to me, Christopher, about the ideal client. Mm-hmm. What does that profile look like?
Well, we have a few of them, and they're great. They're so easy to work with, where they're responsive in terms of getting documents to us in a timely manner, because certain documents, if you get them apostilled, for example, they have a shelf life. So if they expire in 3 months and the client's sitting on the file, then they've got to go back and get them done again, which is frustrating on both sides. So it's finding people who are motivated to get this done, because the first portion of the process is where we have control. Once it gets submitted to the different governments, we're then dependent on their processing procedures, and that we don't have control over. So we have to give them time to do their job. So that first phase where we can be in control and be as time effective as possible is certainly the best.
And do you work with the client throughout the entire process, and what does that look like after they've secured their citizenship?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So all the way through. So we help them with the initial gathering of documentation. We complete all the application forms, get everything prepared, ready for submission to the government. We continue to then manage the file all the way through. And then once they're approved, we assist them with post-approval services. So some people want to either rent a property, get a driving license, open bank accounts, all that sort of post-approval side that we'll provide. In most cases, we have offices in these jurisdictions. So one of our policies is we want to meet our clients in person at least once throughout the process. So it could be beginning, middle, or end, but we just want to at least have that initial connection with them at some point.
It sounds like the due diligence process is pretty rigorous.
Yeah, and it has to be. I mean, the trouble is that not everybody does this. And then if bad applications get through, they end up getting refused, by the different governments. But then it just makes it gives a funny impression of the industry that people are doing this for the wrong reasons. And quite frankly, if people are looking to do it for the wrong reasons, they're not going to use one of these programs because the due diligence is so thorough. So they're going to find different vehicles, to try and get status in one of these countries.
Yeah, your approach, I think, of integrity first, given that it can be seen as a very challenging space, I think speaks volumes of the type of work that you do in the sector.
Thank you. And to that end, we also deal with some very high-profile people, very public people, and also politically exposed people. And so if they fall into that category, there's additional amounts of due diligence we need to undergo, such as doing government-level background verification reports. And these are done by independent third-party providers. So we can make sure we get a complete picture. So when we're representing them to these governments, we know everything that's going to come up when the government does their own internal searches. The only thing we don't have access to is Interpol, Europol, sanctions lists, watch lists, etc. That's where the governments will do that on their side. But everything else, we can get a pretty solid picture of the applicant.
And what's the landscape going to look like with the upcoming American political election?
Well, the states right now, everyone's got a different reason why they may look at this. Traditionally, the United States wasn't a major source market, but the travel ban was really an important factor in this, why people realized they weren't prepared. And what they're looking to do now is actually enhance the freedoms that you have as an American and give yourself as many options as possible. Because right now, if something happened in the US and you said, look, I need a break, but I need to go somewhere, you want to make sure you have the correct status to be there. I mean, in the pandemic in the Caribbean islands, for example, they closed their borders unless you were a citizen. So you could have the nicest house on the island, but if you were only coming in as a visitor, you were getting turned away. And again, those frustrations were starting to come through and people realized, again, they weren't prepared. So as the American market is evolving, it's becoming a lot more mainstream and in the sort of conversations people are having. And even to a degree in the celebrity set, it's kind of the new must-have item, right? It's not the car you drive or the watch on your wrist, it's what passport's in your pocket. And that's for life, right? Let's not forget it, citizenship is for life. So car, you can buy it and sell it, same with your watch, but the citizenship is for life.
And what are two things that you would like most people to know about Latitude? Well,
Latitude Group, we pride ourselves as being, our CEO is certainly one of the pioneers of the industry. I've been doing this for 26 years. Latitude Group is very much at the forefront of due diligence and promoting code of ethics and best practices in our space. We are able to give guidance to our clients on both sides of the fence, if you like, from understanding what happens on the government side, as well as providing exemplary services to the private clients. Our catch line is, our clients expect the world and we deliver it. And so we're very, very important for us that the clients have a high satisfaction of the process because a big part of our business is through referrals.
And I think you, just to interject, I think you deliver with a high bar of integrity, which I think is probably the most important thing in the sector.
Yeah, it's key. And this is another reason why we're trusted by governments, because we do operate at the highest possible standards, in a space that for many years was highly unregulated. And, so it's important that we can self-regulate as best possible.
This was so informative. I'm sitting with Christopher Willis, Managing Partner of Latitude. Thank you for joining.
My pleasure, Ari. Good to see you.